And let me mention a couple things before we start. First of all, I had the meeting with the person from the Learning Center regarding the middle term assessment process, and it was a very interesting and fruitful meeting. And I wanted to thank you, every one of you who answered the survey, because it really provided some interesting feedback for me. And definitely both the positive feedback on the strengths that you are seeing in the course, and also the points where there is some room for improvement. I appreciate them immensely. Seriously, I want to thank you for spending that time in filling out that survey and providing that feedback. So this is like a 2.5 hours meeting, 2 hours meeting, and we talk about everything and the different dimensions that have to do with communications in the course, about the evaluations, about the different activities that I have included in the course. And again, thank you for both sides of the coin. I think that the positive feedback that you have given in terms of where you see the strengths, I appreciate a lot of what you have identified there regarding the different methodologies that I've been trying to use, regarding the materials, the experiments, the different interactive activities we try to do. In fact, we'll continue doing that today in couple quick exercises. And also on the room for improvement, I also want to thank you, because I think you are right on target on many of these things. I mean, in general, I agree with your points, and I will try to adjust to those as soon as possible regarding, and I'm looking here at the notes that I was discussing with her. I think I can do a better job with respect to the rubrics and the evaluations of the writing assignments, in giving you, and in fact, probably going over those rubrics before you hand in those assignments, so we can have a better feedback in both ways on what I could be expecting from the written exercises. And so I noted that, and I agree with you that I can do a better job in that sense. And also regarding the quizzes and the grading system, I am going to try to see how I can respond to some of the comments that were included in her report, so that we don't have to modify the grading system of the course. I think we can continue with that one, but probably give you more, let's call it diversification, in the sense that probably I could have some more of those short quizzes in which you have more chances. And in fact, I like that idea that I have used in some other places, and probably we can implement it here. And that is that if you miss one of N quizzes, I would drop one of those in case you couldn't come, you had a really bad time that day, and so on. So I'll probably try to adjust that in terms of the quizzes. I mean, I don't want the quizzes to be a source of stress for you guys. I want them to be a way for me to check how is your learning going, and for you to check to yourself how is that going, along with the Zoom polls that I've been doing. And in fact, I need to update my file and send it back to you with some more of the answers that we had at the end of last week and last Tuesday. So I will be trying to do that tomorrow and Saturday. This week has been hectic because I had to teach an 8 hours workshop for a big economic group here in Colombia, who invited me to teach them a course on behavioral economics applied to issues of diversity. And this has taken a big toll on me this week. And so I haven't had the chance to start reading your essays or to get back to some pending couple issues that I still owe you in terms of those polls and the quizzes and the like. So again, thank you for that feedback. I wrote down a few more things here to see how can I improve to respond to those issues that you noted quite sharply and in fact on target on many of the issues that I can improve for the course. And so we'll be trying to, I'll be trying to do that in the rest of the semester. Secondly, we are going to come back to markets next week. In fact, let me share here or maybe I can do it here. We'll be coming back to markets next week, and the idea would be to revisit what we had from the market for cars at the start of the semester, but we're going to put some more economics into that in terms of the models that we use in economics to analyze markets and when markets fail, and introduce more formally in the models how we address the issues of externalities in markets, the issues of external costs or social costs, the issues of how equilibria might change because of these externalities, and in particular negative externalities regarding the environment. So we'll be going back to markets, and therefore my suggestion is that you start reading chapter 12 from our book. I will be sending over the weekend the plan for the week so that you have an idea, but I want to alert you that for next week, the idea is that you are reading at least the first half of chapter 12, where we will be dealing with these issues of externalities. So for those of you who have had previous courses in economics, you should be able to quickly go over like an overview of how we analyze markets from the standard economic model, the supply and demand curves, and then we'll get into the issue of externalities. If you haven't had that before, or you forgot it, or it's still hard for you, I invite you to start reading from the start of the chapter in this chapter 12, so that you get a glimpse of how is this done in economics, because that's going to be a set of tools that we're going to be using directly to analyze the problems that we have been addressing. And in fact, the idea is that for a next exercise that we will be doing, either through an essay or a quiz or work in groups here in class, what I will be doing is to go to every one of the different topics that you have chosen, that you wrote in this essay one, and see how we can address those through the analysis of markets. So in the essay that you handled last week, you did that through the tools of game theory in terms of the social interactions between two or more agents. Now we need to understand how markets are related to that. And I'm pretty sure that every one of your topics have to do with a market somehow. I'm pretty sure about that. So what I will be doing is to encourage you to use these tools of the economic analysis of markets, and when markets fail, to understand the topic that you are addressing in your research. And so we will be, as I said there, revisiting the experiment on the cars market. You may want to go back to the recording of that session and the second session where I discussed some of the data from that, so that we go back to that and then connect it with chapter 12. And finally, as I said before, I will have feedback for you on your essays over the weekend. So my plan is to start working on that tomorrow, although I have class tomorrow, and then Saturday, I will devote most of the day to read your essays and get to that back to you. So I don't know if there are questions on any of these things. And if not, let me now start maybe with the full screen here. Let's see. So we already covered this, and now I want to get back to the topic of fairness. And here's what I want you to think for a couple minutes on your own. And then I am going to ask you in breakout rooms, in small groups, to tell your answer to what I'm going to show you in a second, and then ask you to think about this and write your best examples in the chat. So here's the idea. I want you to think again of the ultimatum game. And in the ultimatum game, we have a bargaining situation. And in the standard game, you can remember that we have these two players, they receive $10. First player decides how to split the money. Second player decides whether to reject or accept. If second player accepts, that's how the money is distributed. If player two rejects, the money is gone and everyone gets zero. So what I want you to think is the following. Going to the topic of substantive and procedural justice. So I want you to think of two situations. And in fact, last Tuesday, I mentioned some to you, and I would invite you to think of a different one in which you can imagine an unfair procedure, the procedure that led to the playing of the game, and then the final allocation of the outcome, in which you could imagine that it was an unfair procedure. Okay? Imagine a way in which the positions in the game or the decisions that are allowed in the game create an unfair process, and yet it could lead to a 50-50 split of the money, okay? And in an opposite way, think of another procedure that led to an 80%, 20% split. So let's say player one keeps 80% and sends only 20% to the responder, but you could think of a fair procedure that led to that situation, okay? And I want you to think of those now, but I want you to think also of the following more general situations. That is, imagine an economic result. In general, it doesn't have to do with the ultimatum game, that would result on a fair inequality outcome. So the outcome is unequal, but you think is fair. And then again, another result that it's equal in the outcome, and yet you think that it's an unfair equality. Okay? So I want you to write those down or keep them in your mind. And what I will do is to send you in 6 groups of 3. There are 18 of you right now. So I'm going to send you in 6 groups of 3, And I'm going to ask you to think about these two questions of these four different situations. Maybe start with one and share it with your two other partners in that exchange. And when you have a good example that you agree with the others in your group that it was a good example, then keep it there in mind. And then when we come back, I want you to type it in the chat room, because that would be a way of getting some feedback from you guys on how you are thinking about these different situations. Okay? So if this is sufficiently clear, please confirm.
I have a quick
Yeah, go
question.
ahead.
Would you like, is it more specific or just like
Yeah.
in a
No,
general sense?
an example. Just give me an example, Connor. Think of a situation. I'm going to give you a silly one for an unfair procedure that led to a 50-50 split. And the unfair procedure would be to say, I am going to assign the first position in the ultimatum game to those of you who have blue eyes. Okay? And I'm going to argue that that's unfair because players one in the ultimatum game eventually have more power to decide how to split the money. And I just said, I want the guys, those of you who are blue eye people, to be player one. And I'm going to call that an unfair procedure, because you could argue that why, Juan Camilo, did you give power to people with blue eyes if blue eyes have nothing to do with skills, merit, capacity to work, bargaining skills, or whatever? I mean, as far as I know, there's nothing special about people with blue eyes. There might be some cultures, like here in Colombia, that if you have blue eyes and you have come to Colombia, some people may flirt a little bit more with you. But it might be the case not only because you have blue eyes, but also because you are a foreigner or because you are an American, right? But what I'm trying to say is assigning the positions because you have blue eyes seems to me an unfair procedure that has nothing to do with how the economy should work. Okay? So I hope, Connor, that gives you an example of a concrete example. Just think of different examples of these four situations. Okay?
Yeah, it did. Thanks.
Mhm. Okay. So think of these four. Think of either one of these four that you have in mind and share it with the two other people. Discuss this for 5 minutes, and then we'll come back and you will tell me what did you discuss in those groups. Okay? So I'm going to do this randomly, and if I remember how is this done, and in fact I can send you this in the chat in a second so that we can have them in your own chats. And so here we are going to have 3 times 6 is 6 groups of 3, and I'm going to send you in a second. There might be a group of 2, if I am correct. Yeah, there should be a group of 2. Okay, so let's do that for 5 minutes. Bring your ideas of these 4 situations. I'm going to put them in the chat in a second, and share them with the others. So here we go. recording. Okay. Okay, so I have right now just two of you sending ideas. Any other one? Okay, Crystal has sent one more. Joseph has typed one more here. Nice, these are interesting ones. All of those are really interesting. So yeah, it's interesting that many of you have thought of the number two. So Max, you typed one, but you didn't say which one you're referring to, which situation, 1, 2, 3, or 4. So if you can type it again with the number of the situation, that would be helpful for me. Chris, two people work on a project together. Okay, does majority of work still get 50-50 grade from the teacher? Okay. Workers, Tammy, two workers do two different amounts of work and both gets paid the same. Okay, two people create a program. One does the marketing, other does the coding. Then the profits are split 50-50. Okay. So I have several of these already here. Let me get a screenshot of these to have them in front of me. And Chris type 1, if two people work on a project, one person does majority of work, they still get 50-50 grade from the teacher. Okay, yeah, I already seen that one. Max. Joseph, merit-based, if people are given equal opportunity to perform a task that takes effort, but not different skills, then the rewards being different is fair because it's based upon the effort or time people put into work. Interesting, because that requires a judgment of whether it's effort or skills that we should reward. And we'll be talking about that in a second. Okay, Joseph has an interesting one too, which is there's a group of salespeople that are assigned to a client, but one makes the deal and the group splits the commission. Yeah, interesting too, because it would depend on how the agreement was written in the first place. Catherine has one more. Two players with the profits being split on a variable, such as the first letter of their name, based on the first letter of the name. In a group of people, the first half of the alphabet gets control over the splitting, and the latter with the rest. That one is interesting, Catherine, and I'll get back to that one in a second. And Catherine argues that this is unfair and not based on any kind of skill or contribution. Person in charge of distributing the salaries has done less work, but wants to pay to that person equally. Okay. Randomization of salary and payout. That would be interesting. That you have a company and you decide that every month you are going to randomize who gets high salaries and low salaries. And maybe let's start with that one, Robert. So do you think that randomization of salary or payout would be fair or unfair, and why?
It would be fair because there's an equal likelihood that'd be 20/80. Is you're basically just making a random number. If you believe that people put in equal work, then randomization would be fair, or
Okay.
even you could randomize around certain.
So you mean subject to the fact that they made an equal amount of work or effort, and then randomizing the 82 would be fair, or at least more fair than one of them exerting some power to keep the 80, right? Okay. So let me take that one back to you in the following situation. There is a book that is circulating a lot now by an author called Michael Sandel. And let me see if I can find the cover. And it's called The Tyranny of Merit. It's right here. Let me see if I can show it to you. So here it is. Let me see if I can share this with you. And here's a screenshot of many images of that book on the tyranny of merit. Michael Sandel is an author who teaches at Harvard. He has a very famous course titled Justice. I don't know how they are doing during these pandemic times, because this is a course that has very often 800 people registered in the course. So they teach this course in this huge auditorium. And in this book, Michael Sandel argues that admissions to elite colleges should be random. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
Basically, you get people that are finishing high school, and regardless of the SAT, regardless of the pocket, the wealth of the family, regardless of anything else, that admissions to these elite colleges should be based only on a criteria of randomness. And this has been quite controversial and has created a lot of stir in the discussion. And this is a guy, Sandel is a philosopher who has worked a lot on justice issues. I mean, this guy didn't come up with this out of the blue. He has thought about this. And think of what Robert just said in the more minuscule case of a ultimatum game, all the way up to say, okay, we are an elite college and we admit 1,000 people every fall. And this time we're just going to run a lottery and get 1,000 high school graduates from all over the country, or for that matter, from all over the world. But let's say in the US, and get them admitted to that college. Then somebody has to figure out the pros and cons of the financial issue, because the university needs revenues. If it's a public university, we'll get them in part from the state, probably. But we know that that's not enough. I mean, public universities charge tuitions too. You guys have to pay tuitions at UMass. So to me, the question back to you is, how fair is that? Or how unfair is that? That you admit 1,000 high school graduates based on a lottery, absolutely flat, plain, random, and get those 1,000 people into an elite college and give them the best training possible of that elite college that has very good teachers, great library, labs, all the toys that you know. And eventually 4 years later, you see if you graduate them and if they do well in life. So I want you to react to that particular case. Anyone wants to react? Would you do it? Would you accept that? Would you be in favor of that? Do you think it would be fair, unfair, and in what accounts? Anyone? Robert, go ahead, because you suggested the idea of randomizing unequal payoffs.
So, I mean, the thing I would say, like, on balance, it makes sense to just admit, like, whoever, because I think you could ultimately, sort of teach them the point where they'd be as successful as anyone else. My issue would probably be with the fact that some people have done the work, you know, like trying to like do all these SATs and trying to like get 1600s and all that. And, you know, I sort of think like they wouldn't, you know, it wouldn't be fair to them, but it might be fair to like, you know, the current middle schoolers, for example.
Okay. Anyone else?
I would say no, it wouldn't be like as fair, because also when you get admitted to college, they see like what kind of person you are, and if it's random and like say a high school student like committed a felony, and they would have the same opportunity that you had, even though that like I don't really know how to explain it, but you didn't do the same things that the other person tried to do, as if they were what college acceptances deem well off or like fair or
Okay.
able to be accepted into the school.
Okay, so let me stop there for a second, because Tammy mentioned something that is interesting, and that is your history, your personal history, worth something that make you more eligible to get something good, which is admission and education in an elite college, in a high quality education system, knowing that if you graduate from that college, your opportunities are going to open up tremendously. But then Tammy says, and Robert mentioned that too, he's concerned that it would be unfair to people who did the job. And when I say did the job, is got the 1600s or whatever the point is needed in SATs, or in the opposite side, in terms of personal system, as Tammy says, someone who is a felon, someone who committed a crime and yet got in the lottery and got the same opportunity as someone who didn't do that. And you probably remember the scene in the movie Batman that I showed you, when you had citizens in one boat, in one ferry boat, with a clicker who could explode the other boat, who is full of people who already committed crimes, and they are paying sentences, and at the same time, those people with another clicker who could blow out the other boat. And this is taken to the extreme, but at some point, if you remember in the scene, there's a woman saying, this is not fair because they already had their chance and they missed it because they broke the law. So we're talking about these extremes in the spectrum. Think of that, of doing something that is worthy your effort to get you with a better chance to enter into this elite college, or in the other side, doing something that would be reprehensible or questionable and should give you less merit to enter into that. And who decides that? Who decides where's the line? So let me qualify a little bit for you and ask somebody else to react. Let's not go to the extreme of, let's say, a person who is a felon, but again, it's an interesting point by Tammy. Should people have a second chance? Even if they broke the law, they went to court, they got a punishment, they got out of jail, and they paid the sentence, and yet they won the lottery to get into an elite college and get their education. Would that be unfair or fair, as opposed to someone who didn't do that, who didn't commit that mistake at some point in their life and was always a lawful citizen and yet didn't get the lottery ticket to enter into the college? And it's not an easy question. But let me come a little bit closer to more gray areas. And that has to do also with the SAT score. So you probably know that the SAT scores and the GRE scores for grad school are being questioned more and more and more. In the last couple of rounds for entering into PhD programs in economics, which is highly demanding in math skills, some programs are dropping, and even some entire schools are dropping the GRE test. I don't know about SAT, but probably some colleges are also thinking about either dropping the SAT or qualifying how much weight the SAT plays as opposed to other things, which Tammy mentioned that could be related to character. And that's why an interview, an essay, and a statement of purpose, many other things can give you extra points to get into an elite school. And then my question is really SAT a good sign of your own personal merits? Or is the SAT also the result of other things outside of your own personal control? What do you think of that particular case of the SAT? Anyone?
So when people take the SAT, it's like, I think it gives like a good baseline of where your academic standing is. So like the colleges can kind of predict what your potential is, but just for as like a deciding factor, I don't think that's a good place for it. I don't know about the GRE, but like the SAT, it's connected to like if your parents have a higher income, it's connected to a higher score because they can pay for extra tutors. And if you go to a more expensive school, they have extra tutoring there.
Right.
And even with the, I don't remember when it was like a couple years ago or something, like the celebrities were paying for their kids to cheat. So I think that's some of that, those also affect that. So I don't think it's like, it's a good basis of what you have, but it's not really a good factor of like the most important factor.
Anyone else on using SATs as a good measurement of personal skills, or where do those skills come from?
I'll just kind of hop in on what Tammy was saying, but I definitely think it's based off of how much money you have, and like paying for the extra classes and that kind of stuff. I mean, also in high school, how many like 4 or 5 hour tests are you even taking ever? Like none. The only one you take is the SAT, and it's super long, and it's testing stuff that you kind of learn in high school, but not a lot of it. Some of the stuff is like super hard. I remember taking it and having no clue what some of the stuff was. So I don't know. I feel like it's like Tammy said, it's a pretty good baseline, but how useful it is now is, I think it's kind of diminishing.
Yeah. And I agree with you. And I think you all have, in a way, you have thought that it kinds of measures some things, but not everything. And at the same time, even if it clearly measures your skills, those skills were not born in you from nothing. They are part of a history of your parents, a history of the context that you grew up, the context of the type of high school and middle school and primary school that you had, the environment that you had in your neighborhood. And then all these things are getting to get connected and determining how much merit this creates for a person to be, let's say, worthy of entering into a particular educational system that is going to change the life of that person. And that's part of the point. Definitely education creates better opportunities, and education creates better wages, better salaries, better income. But at the same time, how is that determined to the whole history that is behind the moment when you present that test for the purposes of looking at that test? And Michael Sandel in particular questions a lot of that. And I invite you to look it up in terms of the book, or there are some short videos of interviews that he has given. He has even written about this in various outlets, to think about how merit might be taken to an extreme and probably should be qualified in terms of whether we have or not a meritocratic society in which every situation rewards effort and skills, as opposed to those effort and skills being determined by other things that are outside of the domain of people. So with those, we could extrapolate that discussion to many of the other examples that you wrote here. One more that to me was really interesting is on the group, the salespeople group. This is Joseph Donovan, and if you want to elaborate, you say, Joseph, a group of salespeople are assigned a client. So notice how you wrote it. You say a group of people is assigned to the client, but one of the salesperson in that group makes the sale, and yet the group splits the commission. So I want you, Joseph, to develop more if you think this is fair or unfair, and others to react to that. So what do you think, Joseph?
Well, when I believe
Go
I
ahead.
thought it was an unfair game because the work put in was unequal. So it was a group that was more supposed to be like making the sale together, and then I wrote it really short so that it would
No,
just
but
fit in the chat.
but it's really interesting. Go ahead, because I think it's provocative, and I want to hear why you think it's unfair, and I will react to that.
Well, I think it's unfair because one person made the sale and then they were all splitting it. So it's similar to like a group project where kind of there's 4 people and 3 people don't really show up to the meetings, do the work.
Yeah.
One person's like, oh, it's due in 2 days, I should probably just do it. And then they all get the same grade. And yeah,
Okay.
that was kind of an analogy.
So you think it's unfair to that person who made the sale, but that person had an assignment being part of a group, and this is what I want to play evil's advocate in the following way. This is a group of people who were assigned to the client, not one single salesperson. So the whole group was assigned to the client. He happened to close the deal, but in advance they were all assigned as a team. So this person is a team member. And therefore, I'm going to claim, just for the sake of the argument, I'm going to claim that if this was a task assigned to a team, the whole team should be rewarded because the goal was achieved. Again, I'm playing devil's advocate, but I want to hear what you think, Joseph. But again, if this was a task for the team, the task was accomplished, the team should be rewarded. We know that one particular person closed the deal, but that person was assigned to a team, and it was supposed to be a team effort. So in that sense, I'm going to defend that this could be fair game in the sense that they were assigned as a team to the task. So what would you say for that? To that?
I think that's a very valid perspective, that it is kind of fair in the sense that the team did at the end of the day make the sale. But I think it's unfair kind of in the micro. It's unfair that the work distribution, to that person who made the sale and had to split it. But macro, I think, I might actually kind of lean towards your devil's advocate position there.
Yeah, and now that I could put it in a intertemporal perspective, in a repeated game. And what if this person is the one in the next round with the next client, the only one who worked to close the deal, and then the third time is the same person closing the deal? Then it's beginning to become kind of unfair in the argument that Joseph made, because this person is the only one doing the effort of getting the clients, and the others are just free riding on the goal of the team, as opposed maybe to having some kind of rotating scheme in which this person who just closed the deal with this client, the next week says to his team members, hey guys, I'm exhausted, or I need to attend a family issue. I closed the deal with this client, but next week I'm not going to be able to put too much effort into this. Why don't you guys do an extra effort to get the next client? And again, we split all as a team the commission. But again, notice that these little details, and notice how the conversation we just had regarding the situation of the SAT scores and the situation about this commission with this group and the clients. Notice how very little details begin to get so important that you begin to rethink your position about what is fair in the splitting of a monetary outcome, or the result of an enterprise, or the result of a business, or the result of a team project, as some of you wrote here also, on where would you think that it would be fair or unfair, in which you are working as a team, and yet by working as a team, having very unequal effort put into the process that leads to the outcome that the team is assigned to. And so all these ideas that you wrote there, I'm going to keep them, because they can give me a little bit more of a perspective on, and also they could be sources of ideas of how to put this into the perspective of environmental issues. What I'm trying to say is, it would be quite easy, I think, to start creating similar situations that have to do with environmental outcomes. I'm thinking about how polluting industries decide to assign the location of their firms. And in fact, in the last 10 minutes, I'm going to show you a situation that was actually written in an internal memo at the World Bank. And this was famous at the time. You may have heard of this or not, that have to do exactly with that, and the concept of fairness, and the concept of making decisions that have environmental outcomes. But let me get back to my to my presentation here, and let me get back to Rawls, because I think Rawls here has a very interesting, I think, perspective into what seems to be a good criteria of assigning results to actions, or results to effort. And in a summary, if you went through this part of the chapter, in chapter 5, there are basically these 3 steps that the Rawlsian perspective has on the issue of fairness. The first one is, whatever the rule you apply to decide how to, for example, allocate tasks, or commissions, or grades, or whatever, has to apply to everyone. That's the first point. Okay. A second point is that you are going to imagine a veil of ignorance in which you don't know in which particular situation you are going to be standing when the action develops. Okay. By that I mean, you don't know your position in the game. Even if you know the game and how it works, you don't know who is going to be assigned to which position in the interaction. And we have seen this from very simple games, 2x2 matrices, the ultimatum game, and so on, all the way to complex situations in which many people are interacting in a larger structure, a market, the operation of the state, a community management arrangement. But again, you are going to assume that there is a veil of ignorance. You are not going to know in advance where are you going to be located at the time that the action is going to happen. And then thirdly, based on that, you are going to evaluate behind that veil of ignorance, how should you proceed? So if you don't know in the ultimatum game, if you are going to be the proposer or the responder, and you need to decide rules on how the ultimatum game should be played, most likely you are going to think of the most fair possible situation, so that once the positions are revealed, are realized, whatever that position is, you are going to be standing in a position that you agreed to, because you decided on the allocation rule in advance behind that veil of ignorance. So I don't know if you guys, when you were little and if you had siblings, there was a very wise perfect solution to splitting a cookie. So your parents gave you a cookie and you are with your brother, your sister, and you need to split that cookie. And that's quite a bargaining situation, similar to the ultimatum game. Similar, not exactly. And to me, the most fantastic, perfect solution was tell to the other one, you split the cookie and I choose which part I want. You see what I mean? So what are you going to do when you split the cookie? You're going to split it in a way in which you are behind the veil of ignorance, because it's the other one who is going to then choose which piece of the cookie your brother and sister is going to choose. And therefore, you are going to split the cookie in the most fair possible way, assuming that even if your sibling is an egoist person, a selfish person, and is going to take the largest piece, then you are better off splitting it equally because you are behind the veil of ignorance. But that's a childish example of what I'm trying to say. You don't know where you're going to be, and therefore you should choose the most fair institution possible because you are watching from the behind the veil of ignorance. And then once your position is realized, even in the worst case scenario, you want to be in a situation that seems fair to you. And obviously it's going to be fair to the others. So notice here what is controversial and interesting. In a way, this is kind of a selfish strategy. In a way, Rawls is kind of suggesting something selfish. Think for yourself. Think that you are behind the veil of ignorance, and think of an institution, an allocation rule that is going to be at least bearable for you, fair for you, and we are going to end up in a society that is going to be fair overall. Thinking from the perspective of your own selfish interest. And that's the case of the cookie with your brother or sister. You split, I choose. And that becomes a very fair Rawlsian solution. And we're going to be talking about that in terms of environmental issues in a second, because it's very relevant to what I'm trying to say. So if we go back to the game, and I'm going to skip this because I want to devote time to the following question. So I'm going to skip this about your essay. So if we want to summarize here, what I'm trying to say is that we have these facts that describe an allocation situation. That means who does what and who gets what. We have been talking a lot about examples of that. And then it comes the evaluation. So the description is based on the facts, and the evaluation is based on the values that people have. And in this framework that we're trying to have here, and this is why it's so important that we go beyond the Pareto criterion, because last time we discussed how problematic the Pareto criterion is sometimes. We're going to be answering two questions. One of them is this allocation efficient? And the other one is this allocation fair? Notice, if we think of the ultimatum game, burning the money, rejecting the offer, is going to answer the first question there as no, because that's not efficient, because we burned the money. We left money on the table. And there is room for improvement for both. That means that the second player accepts if the first player offers a fair allocation. And that goes to the second question. Is this allocation fair? And is there another allocation that could be fairer? And how do we evaluate which allocations are more fair than others? And for that, we need deliberation, democratic deliberation. And this is why the liberal democracy always has offered this possibility that we need a space in which everyone has her own say, so that we can discuss from the different perspectives what is fair and what is not fair. And that brings me to this particular sentence of a famous economist from the start of the 20th century, who said at some point that an economic transaction is a solved political problem, and that economics has gained the title of the queen of the social sciences by choosing solved political problems as its domain. And this has been a belief in many people in economics, that economics doesn't have to deal with politics because all problems in economics are political problems that are solved. If you assign property rights, if you let everyone choose on their own what they want to do, and with clear property rights, everybody's going to exchange in their own benefit, and through the markets and the invisible hand, they will have no political problems. And that might be reasonable in certain games. So think of this game quickly. Think of player one who moves first, and player one can move left or right. If player one moves left, nobody gets anything. If player one moves right, now player one has to wait for player two to move. And then if player two moves left, each of them gets 5 and 5. But if player two moves right, player one gets 8 and player two gets 0. And it is very easy to prove that this is a political problem that it's solved. There's no bargaining discussion here. Clearly, one should move right first because one is expecting that two moves left. Because two is going to compare this 5 against this 0. And 5 is better than 0, so left dominates right. 2 is going to pick left, and therefore 1 should pick right, because for 1, this 5 is better than this 0. That is a solved political problem that economics is familiar with. But what if I pose a slightly different game? Think of this game. Again, if one moves left, they both get 10. If one moves right, now one has to wait for 2 to move. And now 2 can decide between left and right. But in this case, for 2, the incentives are different. Because now for 2, 34 is better than 18. And therefore 2 should move right. So if one thinks that 2 is going to move right, one is expecting to earn only $2, whereas one is going to move left, getting $10, is going to be much more secure with those $10. And that is not a political solved problem. Because 1 and 2 should sit down and figure out how to solve this game. And maybe 1 can impose on 2 by force to move left so that they both get 18. Or maybe 2 can impose 1 to move right, and then 2 move right, and then 2 gets 34 and leaves 1 with only $2. This game here is not solved without getting into the political problem of deciding who is 1, who is 2, who gets to be 1, who gets to be 2. And here's when I want you to think about the Rawlsian perspective of the veil of ignorance once again. Think about it. If you were to play this game in the left, I don't see much problem of using the Rawlsian perspective. I don't mind, basically, in this game in the left, in there. I don't mind being player 1 or player 2. Because I expect that we both are going to decide with our own selfish preferences, and we are going to end up in this 5-5 outcome. And that 5-5 outcome is not only efficient, it's Pareto optimal, it's the Nash equilibrium. It's a best response to each other. And it worked fine. We don't need the veil of ignorance. But think about this game. I want you to think about this game through the perspective of roles with the veil of ignorance. Because in this particular case, you're going to be thinking, okay, what if I am 1? Would it be better to be 1 or to be 2? If you're 1, you get to decide whether to move the whole situation to 10-10, and you may decide, okay, it's fine that we get both 10, and I'm not going to take chances. If I am 1 and I want to take chances because I might be able to get 18, for that I need to trust that 2 is going to move left. Or I am going to use force to impose into the decision to move left. And that's where institutions come. So with the veil of ignorance here, we need to think, how would you create an allocation rule to solve this political problem so that if we all agree through the deliberative process that we should all end up in this game in 18-18 because it's a nice result. It's equal and it's efficient. But 2 and 34 is equally efficient. They both add up to 36. So who is going to decide whether we end up here or here? And that's why the veil of ignorance is so important. So wrapping up on that chapter 5, before I show you the situation that I want you to hear, this is a summary in chapter 5 of what is at stakes in the whole analysis. And I am putting this diagram for you here because I want you to think in our next step into building into your topic for your research and your term paper, what kind of institutions are present in, I shouldn't be using that, let me use another color. Let's say this green. What kind of institutions are present in the situation that you're analyzing? How is biology playing a role? And by biology, I mean, if you're thinking about deforestation, how is biology playing a role there? If you're thinking about climate change or energy use of the harm to the oceans, you need to have some ecological perspective of what is going on. How is technology playing a role here? And how are the individual preferences playing a role there too? Now, these all are going to be interacting through how power is distributed, what reservation or fallback positions each of the players have. Imagine that you're playing the ultimatum game. You are the responder, and you need to bring food home tonight for your kid. And they offer you in the ultimatum game splitting $100. And this person keeps 98 and leaves you with 2. And still, those $2 might buy you a little bit of food to bring home tonight. Would you accept that? And eventually you would be forced to accept that offer, being as unfair as it looks. Then technology with biology is going to determine which are the feasible allocations of the different outcomes. What is feasible? What is within the frontier of what is happening here? And that is also going to determine what is economically feasible, and at the end, how is it going to be the final outcome of who gets what and who does what in the game. And let me finish in 1 minute to leave you intrigued about this situation. This is a facsimile of an actual memorandum that circulated in 1991 internally in the World Bank by a famous economist who is still alive and quite actively, actually, Larry Summers. And he sent a memo to his team to discuss the conjecture, the hypothesis, the possibility that if rich countries that have dirty industries, and that's how they, as you can see here, up here, dairy industries. And notice how he writes this, just between you and me. If these dirty industries should be encouraged to migrate to less developed countries, LDCs. And the argument he develops here in this memo that I'm going to post for you and that I have transcribed here, the arguments for moving dirty industries to less developed countries is the following. It's a series of elements of argument. One is that by moving these dirty industries to places that already have low life expectancies, lowest wages, lowest incomes, the value of the economic harm caused by that pollution is going to be smaller in amount, in economic amounts, that if that harm is conducted in countries that are rich, where people make more money, have higher salaries. And also because those people have longer life expectancies. And finally, and thirdly, because in these less developed countries, there is less demand for clean environments, because these are poor countries who are struggling to develop industries, create employment, and the like. And this was, you can imagine, very controversial. And in fact, Summers wrote a couple years later, because of the scandal that happened because of that, he wrote trying to say that this was drafted as a comment on a research paper, and this was never going to be proposed as a policy by the World Bank to be implemented worldwide, and that he wouldn't be that stupid to think of proposing to dump toxic waste and dirty industries into anyone's backyard. I want you to think about the situation and think how the veil of ignorance would apply to this particular case of this memo that was internally circulated and that created such a debate, and how the different arguments that we have used would apply. The Pareto criteria, the Rawlsian perspective of the veil of ignorance, the idea of social optimality, but also the idea of fairness. How would you apply these concepts to this particular memo, to this particular proposal? And to say bye to today's class, I want you to read this poem by Kenneth Boulding, the same guy who wrote about the spaceship Earth that we read at the beginning. But I will let you read it on your own. And when you're done, we are finished for today, and I can say bye to you when you have finished reading.
So yeah, we can't see your screen right now. It's not
No,
sharing it.
really?
No.
What you didn't say before, wait. So you didn't see the memo?
No, I didn't see it, but I understood everything you were saying.
Oh my goodness, I thought I was showing the memo. Can you
Oh,
see
no.
the poem there?
Yeah.
You should have told me that you were not seeing the memo. Okay, I will send the memo in an announcement through Moodle. But here's the poem to close today. And thank you for coming today. So thank you for coming, and I will send the memo, which is right here. I don't know why, here it is. This is the memo, but I will send you that in an announcement, and I will let you take a look at that. So that's that for today. So I'll see you guys on Tuesday, and keep visiting Moodle to see more information on what is happening. Okay. So thank you very much. Have a great weekend.
Thank you. You too.
Okay, bye-bye.